She's dressed like a maid, fetch the owner now. The words cut through the quiet lobby like the snap of a whip. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. For a brief, suspended moment, the entire room shifted its gaze toward me, like I was a stain on their polished floors. This isn't just a story, it's a moment where humiliation met silence, and silence answered louder than any shout. Watch till the end. You don't want to miss how this unfolds. I didn't flinch. Not this time. My father stood a few feet away, chest puffed like he owned the world. His voice had that sharp, commanding tone I remembered from childhood dinners, when even the clinking of silverware froze under his glare. Except today he wasn't at home. He was in the heart of my club and he didn't know it. The air was heavy with expensive cologne and freshly polished wood. It was early evening, 6:45 p.m., the in-between hour when the sun spilled gold through the tall glass windows and the warm lights inside started to hum. Staff moved briskly, arranging silver trays and aligning glasses, their crisp uniforms matching the cream and dark wood aesthetic of the lobby. And there I was, standing in a simple beige cardigan, black slacks, and a soft scarf tucked neatly under my chin. Nothing fancy. Nothing loud. Just ordinary. That was the point. I wanted to see how people treated someone who didn't look important. My father clearly failed that test. The young receptionist stiffened behind the mahogany desk, unsure whether to obey his order or look to me for direction. The lobby manager, Mr. Cole, emerged from the side hallway at the sound of the commotion. He was an older gentleman, silver hair, always composed, always observant. He recognized me instantly, his eyes softening for a fraction of a second before his professional mask slid back on. "Good evening, sir," he said to my father, his tone courteous but steady. "Is there a problem?" "Yes, there's a problem," my father barked. "This woman is standing here as if she belongs. She looks like she's here to clean the floors. Where is the owner? I want to speak to someone in charge before I set foot another inch in this place." Some guests nearby chuckled under their breath. Others pretended to look away but didn't. Their curiosity hung in the air like a held breath. I caught the eyes of one woman sitting on the leather sofa. She gave me that pitying look people reserve for those they assume are powerless. I smiled back at her. A small, measured smile. Inside, my pulse beat steadily, not with shame but with the quiet rhythm of control. I could have ended this scene with a single sentence. One name. One truth. But where's the satisfaction in that? Mr. Cole turned to me now. His lips curved into the faintest, most deliberate smile. "Ma'am," he said gently, "would you like us to end their membership today?" The question floated through the lobby like a spark. Precise. It landed on my father like cold water. He frowned, confused. "Excuse me? What membership? Who is she to decide that?" My fingers rested calmly on the strap of my handbag. "I'm just waiting," I said lightly. "Go ahead, do what you need to." My voice was even, almost casual, but the weight behind it wasn't lost on Mr. Cole. He gave a slight nod, the kind of nod shared between two people who understand far more than they say. Meanwhile, my father's irritation grew. His new wife, Gloria, always perfectly styled, always eager to mirror his moods, stood beside him with a hand perched dramatically on her hip. "Honestly," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "it's unacceptable. This place has clearly lowered its standards." The staff exchanged glances. A waiter carrying a tray of sparkling water nearly tripped when she waved her hand dismissively near him. Her perfume trailed behind her like a territorial flag. I shifted my weight, taking in the scene like a director behind the camera. The marble floor beneath my feet was cool. The faint clink of glasses from the bar echoed softly. Every sound sharpened. Every movement slowed. This wasn't just a public outburst. This was the stage I had been waiting for. "Sir," Mr. Cole addressed my father again with polite firmness, "may I ask for your name?" "You may," my father snapped. "It's Daniel Whitaker. And I've been a member of this club for 12 years. I know how things should be run here. And this," he gestured at me with a wave that bordered on insult, "this is not it." 12 years. He said it like a crown. Like his membership gave him authority over every corner of the building. He didn't realize those 12 years were nothing compared to the weight of the papers in my private office upstairs. "I see," Mr. Cole replied, glancing briefly at the reception screen. "Thank you, Mr. Whitaker." My father crossed his arms, smug as if he'd scored a point. I took a slow breath, letting the warm lobby air fill my lungs. I didn't interrupt. Not yet. Just then a couple walked past us toward the dining area. I recognized them, board members who had been there the day I signed the final documents. They gave me discreet nods as they passed. One of them murmured, "Good evening, Mrs. Whitaker," in that subtle, respectful tone reserved for someone above. My father didn't catch it. Gloria was too busy scrolling through her phone, complaining about the Wi-Fi. I met their eyes, returned the nod ever so slightly, and then refocused on my father. "Are you just going to stand there?" he barked. "This is ridiculous. I will not step into this building until someone competent addresses this insult." His words echoed through the room. Staff froze mid-motion. Guests leaned forward. Even the chandelier lights seemed to hum louder. I could feel the weight of decades pressing behind those words. Years of him belittling, controlling, demanding. But this time I wasn't the frightened daughter sitting at his dinner table. I wasn't the one shrinking under his voice. I was the one who held the invisible key in my pocket. "Mr. Cole," I said softly, not looking at him but at my father, "please proceed." My father blinked. "Proceed with what?" The reception printer suddenly hummed to life. The young receptionist, now visibly nervous, followed Mr. Cole's quiet instructions. Papers slid out one by one, the sound slicing through the tension. My father turned toward the desk. "What are you doing? You don't have the authority to." "I assure you, sir," Mr. Cole interrupted gently, "everything is being handled according to policy." Gloria gasped as she saw their membership file appear on the monitor. "What's happening?" she hissed, clutching her designer bag tighter. I stayed silent, my hands relaxed, watching like someone who's seen the end of the movie but doesn't spoil it for others. It was fascinating, watching the power shift without raising my voice, without lifting a finger. The room felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for my next move. The printer stopped. Mr. Cole took the papers, placed them neatly on the desk and looked at me, not for instruction but in acknowledgement. My father's confusion cracked into anger. His face flushed. "You will regret this," he spat, pointing at the manager. "I will have your job for this." Mr. Cole didn't answer. He simply turned to me again as if the rest of the room didn't exist. "Ma'am," he said clearly, "shall we finalize the cancellation?" You could have heard a pin drop. I looked at my father, really looked at him. The man who once decided everything in our house, who dismissed my ambitions with a wave, who believed control was his birthright. And I smiled. Not out of kindness. Out of quiet certainty. "Not yet," I said slowly. A collective exhale rippled through the room. My father stood frozen, trying to make sense of a hierarchy he thought he understood but clearly didn't. I stepped closer just enough so that he had to look at me, not through me. "You'll want to watch carefully," I whispered. "This is going to be educational." His brows knit together. "What are you talking about?" I didn't answer. "Not here. Not yet." Mr. Cole inclined his head slightly, understanding the game I was playing. He turned back to the desk, signaling the receptionist to pause. The moment was suspended perfectly, like a match hovering above the wick, seconds before the fire starts. I turned away slowly, walking toward the elevator with deliberate, unhurried steps. My father's voice echoed behind me, laced with frustration and uncertainty. "Who do you think you are?" he shouted. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. Because soon he'd find out. "Who do you think you are?" he shouted behind me. The words echoed in the marble lobby as the elevator doors slid shut. His voice still had that familiar sharp edge, but for the first time it didn't pierce me. It rolled off like rain hitting a window I no longer opened. As the elevator hummed upward, my reflection stared back from the polished doors, calm, composed, with a hint of a smile tugging at the corner of my lips. It wasn't arrogance. It was recognition. I had waited years for this quiet, suspended moment, the moment I finally stood beyond his reach. But that power didn't appear overnight. It was born on a different night, a night when everything between us cracked beyond repair. It was winter. Late. The house smelled of burning wood and his aftershave, the same strong cedar scent that used to fill every corner like an uninvited guest. I remember sitting at the dinner table wearing a navy sweater I'd knitted myself. My hands were warm from cooking. I'd made beef stew, his favorite, hoping he'd notice. He didn't. He was too busy lecturing me about my future, his fork stabbing the air like a judge's gavel. "You're wasting your potential," he said, his voice rising with every word. "You have a degree, Catherine. A good name. Do you really think working at some tiny local firm is worthy of you?" I tried to explain, again, that I wanted to learn things from the ground up. That I didn't want to depend on his connections. That I needed to build something that was mine. He didn't hear me. He never did. When I said I was turning down his offer to work under one of his business partners, the room went silent. His spoon clinked against the bowl, slowly, deliberately. "You're making a fool of yourself," he finally said. "And of me." My mother sat quietly at the other end of the table, eyes lowered as if trying to become invisible. That was her way of surviving his storms, vanishing emotionally until they passed. "I'm not a child," I said, my voice trembling but steady. "I can choose my path." That's when he laughed, not out of humor but out of disbelief. "You're my daughter. Your path was decided the day you were born into this family." Something inside me shifted at that moment. It was small, like a hairline crack in glass. But once it's there, every word, every look afterward widens it. For weeks he tried to bribe, shame, guilt, and scare me into changing my mind. But I stayed firm. I rented a small apartment in town, packed my things quietly, and moved out without fanfare. He didn't take it well. A week later he invited me back for what he called a civil dinner. I should have known better. The table was set like a scene from our childhood holidays. White linens, silver candlesticks, his favorite jazz playing low. Gloria wasn't in the picture yet, so it was just my parents and me. I wore a soft gray dress and brought a bottle of wine I'd saved for a special occasion. I told myself maybe, just maybe, this was the olive branch. Instead it was an ambush. Halfway through dinner he cleared his throat and said, "I've made arrangements for you to move back home. I'll give you a position in one of the family companies. We'll pretend this phase never happened." "I'm not moving back," I said gently. "I have a lease. A job I like. I'm fine where I am." His hand came down on the table, not a slam but firm enough to make the silverware jump. "Enough," he said sharply. "You're embarrassing me. Do you have any idea how people talk? My daughter, working like a common clerk." "I am a clerk," I said quietly. "For now. But I'm learning." His face turned red. He stood up so abruptly that the chair scraped the floor. "You're no longer my responsibility," he spat. "If you walk out that door again tonight, you walk out of this family." My mother reached for his arm, whispering, "Daniel, please." But he shook her off. I looked at the door. Then at him. And for the first time I didn't see my father. I saw a man desperate to control what was slipping away. "I love you," I said softly, "but I'm not your property." I picked up my coat and left. That night, as the cold air hit my face outside, I realized something final had broken. He didn't call. He didn't visit. And for years after, every holiday passed in silence. He cut me out of his will, told extended family I was stubborn and ungrateful. And when Gloria entered his life, she became the perfect echo of his opinions. But that wasn't the end. A few months after I left, I got a call from a former colleague at a local bank. He mentioned that the prestigious club my father loved so much was quietly drowning in debt. Memberships were dropping, maintenance costs rising, and the owners were considering selling shares to stay afloat. I remember standing in my tiny kitchen, the sun streaming through the single narrow window, holding that phone like it was a key. Something stirred in me, not bitterness but clarity. I didn't need to force him to see my worth. I could build something he'd never be able to control. That was the day I drove past the club. Not as a guest, not as a member's daughter, but as someone observing an opportunity. From the outside it looked glamorous. Arched stone entrance, manicured hedges, cars lined up like trophies. But behind those walls, numbers were bleeding. And numbers don't lie. I started researching quietly. I spent late nights reading financial reports, tracing patterns of decline, studying the board structure. My job at the firm wasn't glamorous, but it gave me access to tools, contacts, and data most people overlooked. I didn't tell anyone. Not friends. Not coworkers. Not even my mother. The more I learned, the clearer my path became. He had cast me out, thinking he'd broken me. But he'd actually freed me. Freed me from his name, his control, his version of success. The day I stopped being his daughter wasn't a single dramatic moment. It was a series of quiet choices that slowly turned into a foundation beneath my feet. I learned to live within my means. I cooked meals on a 2-burner stove, rode the bus, and worked extra shifts to save. I stitched clothes to avoid buying new ones. Every time I deposited a little more into my savings, it wasn't just money, it was proof. Proof that I didn't need him to exist. One night, about 3 years after that dinner, I got an envelope in the mail. Inside was a wedding invitation. His. To Gloria. I stared at the elegant card, the embossed letters spelling his name and hers together. No note. No acknowledgement. Just a formality sent out of obligation, perhaps to keep up appearances. I didn't attend. But I clipped the invitation and tucked it into a folder in my desk labeled motivation. I wasn't chasing his approval anymore. I was building my own life brick by brick. And quietly in the background, the club's financial situation kept unraveling. Shares started appearing on the market in small batches. And I started buying. No one noticed. Why would they? I was just a clerk, living simply, keeping my head down. But underneath that simplicity was something he'd never taught me: patience. I didn't buy those first shares out of arrogance. I bought them because I could see something my father never bothered to look for: weakness hidden behind polished walls. The market listing had been quiet, almost buried in the back pages of a financial bulletin I subscribed to. A small batch of shares, priced low, offered by a private holder who needed quick cash. I remember holding that envelope under the warm yellow light of my kitchen, the paper thin but the weight of the decision enormous. I wasn't rich. I didn't have family backing. What I had was discipline, and a steady stream of savings I'd guarded like a secret. I sent the payment the next morning. No fanfare. No announcement. Just a quiet signature and a wire transfer. That was the beginning. After work, I started spending more evenings at the library, combing through the club's old financial filings. The smell of dusty paper and floor polish became my nightly companions. Rows of thick binders held stories most people ignored: maintenance costs, board minutes, membership decline graphs, supplier invoices. Where others saw boring paperwork, I saw patterns. They'd been overspending for years. Renovations that didn't match the revenue, executive salaries climbing while membership quietly slipped. It wasn't a scandal. It was neglect. The kind of neglect that spreads slowly until someone notices the cracks. I noticed. And every month, as more shares quietly appeared, I bought. Sometimes just a handful. Sometimes more. Each purchase was a small stone added to a foundation no one else knew I was building. I still remember one evening at the post office, standing in line with a man who recognized the club logo on my envelope. He wore a blazer too tight around the shoulders and smelled faintly of cigar smoke. "You a member there?" he asked casually. I smiled. "Something like that." He chuckled, bragging about how the club was old money and untouchable. I nodded, let him talk, and mailed my envelope. People like him believed appearances lasted forever. I'd learned otherwise. At work, my colleagues thought I was just frugal. I brought homemade lunches, wore simple clothes, skipped after-hours dinners. What they didn't see was the quiet stack of documents growing in a locked drawer at home: stock certificates, board announcements, receipts, and notes. My apartment became a war room disguised as a living space. There were doubts, of course. Nights when I'd sit on the floor surrounded by papers, staring at numbers, wondering if I was being foolish. What if the club collapsed entirely? What if I lost everything I'd saved? But every time that fear crept in, I pictured my father's face at that dinner table, his voice saying, "Your path was decided the day you were born." Well, my path was mine now. About 3 years into this quiet accumulation, I received an unexpected letter. The handwriting was formal, the envelope embossed with the club's seal. It was an invitation to attend a shareholders' briefing, the first I'd ever been invited to. My holdings had reached the threshold. I stared at the letter for a long time. My name printed in black ink looked different now. Not as a daughter. Not as an outsider. As a stakeholder. The meeting was scheduled for a crisp autumn afternoon. I took the day off work, dressed in a navy skirt suit that had been sitting in the back of my closet for years, and rode the bus downtown. The club's boardroom was everything I expected: wood-paneled walls, oil paintings of men in suits, long polished table with crystal water pitchers. There were maybe 15 people in attendance. Most were older men talking about golf, real estate, or their children's law schools. I sat quietly at the end of the table listening. No one paid attention to me at first. Then the chairman began the briefing. He talked about rising costs, deferred maintenance, membership stagnation. They glossed over it with practiced optimism, but the numbers on the projector told a different story. Declines, delays, stretched budgets. I asked one question. Just one. About vendor contracts that hadn't been updated in 7 years. The room went quiet for a beat, then moved on. But afterward, one of the older board members, a man named Harold Thompson, approached me. "You pay attention," he said simply. "I like numbers," I replied. He smiled faintly. "Most people like power. You might do well here." That conversation became the beginning of an unlikely alliance. Harold had been on the board for decades but had grown tired of watching careless decisions pile up. He didn't have the energy to fight anymore, but he recognized someone who did. Over coffee in the lounge a few weeks later, he told me stories about the club's glory days and its slow decline. "They're too comfortable," he said, stirring his tea. "They don't see the roof leaking until it collapses on their heads." I listened. I asked questions. And slowly Harold began sharing board reports with me. Public ones at first, then background notes he'd kept. I never asked for favors. I just listened. By the 5th year, my share count had grown enough to give me a small but steady voice at meetings. Not a loud one, but a voice that couldn't be ignored. When I spoke, Harold backed me. And when Harold backed me, others listened. There was one meeting I'll never forget. The treasurer presented another plan to spend heavily on cosmetic upgrades to impress prospective members. I raised my hand and asked, "And how do you plan to fund this when membership renewal is down 12% year over year?" Silence. The kind that carries weight. They tried to brush it off, but Harold leaned forward and said, "She's right. You've ignored this for too long." For the first time I saw heads turn my way, not dismissively but thoughtfully. It wasn't power yet. But it was the beginning. Meanwhile, outside those boardrooms, my personal life remained quiet. I didn't reconcile with my father. We exchanged obligatory holiday cards, nothing more. I occasionally heard his voice through relatives, boasting about his standing at the club, never realizing his daughter was slowly tightening her hands around its spine. One December evening, after a particularly tense shareholders' vote, I walked out of the club into the cold night air. Snowflakes caught in my hair. My breath came out in small clouds. I stood across the street, looking at the building's glowing windows, and whispered to myself, "Almost." Because by then I had a plan. It wasn't just about owning pieces of paper. It was about positioning. Quiet influence. Aligning with people who wanted change but didn't want to lead it. And slowly they started looking to me. Mr. Cole, the lobby manager, was one of those people. I'd noticed his competence early on. He remembered faces, understood dynamics, and kept his dignity no matter who shouted at him. One evening after a late meeting, I found him locking up. "You're here late," he said. "So are you," I replied. We shared a brief conversation, nothing conspiratorial but enough to plant mutual respect. Over the next couple of years he became a quiet ally. He'd tip me off about operational inefficiencies that upper management ignored. I never abused the information. I just kept notes. Every detail mattered. By the 7th year I had become one of the top 3 shareholders. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was methodical. Some thought I was lucky. Others didn't even know my name. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Because my father still strutted through those halls, oblivious. He shook hands with board members, boasted about his tenure, criticized staff loudly. And every time I saw him from a distance I reminded myself to stay invisible. For now. One spring afternoon during a casual board luncheon, Harold leaned over to me and whispered, "When the time comes they'll look to you." I sipped my tea and gave him a small nod. I didn't need to rush. The roof hadn't collapsed yet. But the cracks were wide enough to let the light in. And that light was about to expose everything. The next afternoon I stood inside my office on the 2nd floor of the club, a quiet wood-paneled space tucked behind the boardroom. It wasn't extravagant, just a large desk, 2 leather chairs, and a window overlooking the lobby below. From there, I could see the grand staircase curving like a polished ribbon and the marble floor where my father had stood barking orders just the night before. I rested my hands on the cool windowsill, watching members trickle in for their evening routines. Golfers still in their polos, women in pearls carrying leather handbags, staff gliding like shadows between them. The hum of conversation drifted upward faintly, blending with the soft classical music that played on loop. Everything looked orderly. But underneath, the machinery was finally aligning in my favor. The board had met that morning. Months of behind-the-scenes preparation, financial reports, performance audits, quiet discussions had culminated in a decision. Unanimous. Membership rules were being tightened. Late payments would no longer be tolerated. Code of conduct violations would carry immediate consequences. And long overdue accounts, even if held by prestigious families, would face revocation. It was framed as a fiscal tightening measure, but everyone in that boardroom knew exactly whose behavior had inspired the push. My father had been skating by on reputation for years, ignoring late dues, shouting at staff, using his long-standing membership like a shield. That shield no longer existed. The policy had been enacted that morning. Implementation began that afternoon. And I made sure I was in my office when the first ripple reached him. Around 5:30 p.m., the sound of raised voices drifted faintly from the lobby. Not a full argument yet, just that edge of indignation I knew so well. I straightened my jacket, adjusted the pearl earrings I'd started wearing again, and walked calmly toward the staircase. I saw him before he saw me. He stood at the front desk, red-faced, waving a letter at the receptionist. Gloria hovered beside him, fanning herself dramatically with a brochure. "What do you mean suspended?" he was saying. "I've been a member here longer than you've been alive." The young receptionist stammered, clearly out of her depth. Mr. Cole appeared from the side hallway like clockwork, his composure intact. "Mr. Whitaker," he said evenly, "the new policies apply to all members. Your outstanding balance has not been resolved despite multiple notices." My father snorted. "Notices? Don't be ridiculous. I've never missed a payment." He had. Repeatedly. He simply never believed anyone would enforce the rules on him. Gloria leaned closer to him, stage whispering loud enough for half the lobby to hear. "This is humiliating. Maybe they've made some clerical error. Surely they wouldn't treat you this way." He puffed up at that. "Exactly. You people must have made a mistake. I demand to see the owner." The lobby stilled. Conversations slowed. It was almost theatrical. I descended the staircase slowly, each step measured, my heels making a soft rhythmic sound against the marble. His head snapped up when he heard it. For a split second, confusion flickered across his face, like he couldn't reconcile the daughter he'd dismissed with the woman walking toward him now. I didn't rush. I didn't smile. "Good evening, Mr. Whitaker," Mr. Cole said politely. "Ms. Whitaker." "Catherine," my father barked, ignoring the formalities. "Do you know what these fools are saying? They're threatening to suspend my membership." His use of "my" landed like a dull echo. "I heard," I said, keeping my tone even. "It's policy now. Non-compliance leads to suspension." He blinked. "Policy? What policy? You can't just invent rules overnight." "It wasn't overnight," I replied. "The board voted. Unanimously." Gloria shifted uncomfortably, looking between us. "Catherine, surely this is a misunderstanding. Daniel's been here for years. He practically built this place's reputation." "Gloria," I said, meeting her gaze steadily, "the club doesn't run on reputation. It runs on rules. Everyone follows them." Her painted smile faltered. My father slapped the letter onto the desk. "This is absurd. I want this fixed now." Mr. Cole remained polite but unmoved. "The balance must be cleared and the behavioral violations addressed. Otherwise, per the new bylaws, your membership remains suspended pending termination." Behavioral violations. That was new for him. 4 years, staff complaints had been quietly shelved, his outbursts dismissed as eccentricities of a senior member. Not anymore. Every outburst, every public humiliation, every unpaid fee had been documented over the years, because I'd quietly made sure they were. And now those files were no longer ignored. "This is personal," he hissed. "Someone's trying to embarrass me." I tilted my head slightly. Why would anyone need to try? His eyes narrowed. "Is this you? Are you behind this nonsense?" I didn't answer. Not directly. Instead, I turned to Mr. Cole. "Would you excuse us for a moment?" He nodded, signaling the receptionist to step away as well. The lobby hushed, but the audience remained. members pretending to sip drinks slowly, heads tilted just enough to listen. My father leaned in, voice low. You think this makes you look powerful, Catherine? Humiliating your own father in public. No, I said calmly. I think the policies make the club stronger. And they apply to everyone. You've become cold, he said bitterly. Ungrateful. I almost laughed at that, but I didn't. Instead, I let a brief silence stretch between us. He hated silence. He filled it with control. But now that silence belonged to me. Finally, I said, maybe I just learned to stop asking for permission. His jaw tightened. Mr. Cole returned, holding a small folder. Mr. Whitaker, this contains the full record of outstanding payments and conduct incidents. You have 7 days to settle the account. If not, termination will proceed automatically. Gloria grabbed the folder, flipping through the pages. Her face paled as she saw the list. Miss Dues, staff complaints, incident reports. Daniel, there's so much here. He snatched it from her. It's lies. All of it. It wasn't. I'd made sure of that. A small subplot unfolded then, a couple approaching the desk behind him. They were new members, dressed elegantly, trying to check in for a dinner reservation. My father turned, furious. Can't you see we're dealing with something important? The woman raised an eyebrow. We're members too, she said coolly. And we pay our dues on time. That single remark cut sharper than anything I could have said. He turned back toward me, his face flushed with humiliation. For once he wasn't in control of the room. I'll fix this, he muttered. You'll see. I stepped aside. I hope you do. The clock's ticking. And then I walked away. Not up the staircase this time, but through the lobby past the onlookers. I didn't need to grandstand. The power wasn't in what I said. It was in what I'd already set in motion. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the club lights glowed soft amber, I sat in my office again alone. The sound of faint chatter drifted upward through the vents. I imagined him sitting at home, folder open, the reality sinking in slowly. For years he'd treated the club as his domain, barking orders, ignoring rules, assuming immunity. And now that same domain was closing its gates on him. And I hadn't raised my voice once. The policy would do the work for me. 7 days. And if he didn't comply, well, the membership didn't vanish with noise. It vanished quietly with signatures and system entries. And I knew him too well. He wouldn't comply. Not fully. Pride would get in the way. It always did. 7 days later, at precisely 10 a.m., I stood in the boardroom with the morning light streaming through the tall windows. Dust motes floated in the air like slow-moving snow, caught in golden shafts of light. The club was quiet at that hour. Members still at home, staff moving in soft rhythms, the building holding its breath before the day began. The board gathered one by one, murmuring greetings, rustling papers. Harold gave me a small nod as he took his usual seat to my right. Mr. Cole stood discreetly near the door, clipboard in hand. It wasn't a regular meeting. It was a membership termination review. And at the top of the list was his name. The folder lay open before me, his account displayed in stark black and white. Missed payments. Incident reports. Violations. A 7-day deadline passed without resolution. No partial payments. No apologies. Just silence from him, except for one curt message delivered through Gloria 2 days earlier. This is beneath me. It will blow over. It hadn't. The chairman cleared his throat. We're here to review the automatic membership terminations per the new bylaws. I believe the first case is Mr. Daniel Whitaker. I lifted my gaze slowly, letting the name settle into the air. I didn't flinch. Correct, I said. A quiet discussion followed. Some board members raised half-hearted questions about optics, about his long-standing history. But Harold leaned forward and said, history doesn't pay the bills. Policy is policy. One by one the votes were cast. Unanimous. Membership terminated. No speeches. No drama. Just signatures sliding across paper, the soft thunk of a stamp, and Mr. Cole stepping forward to collect the final documents for processing. It was over in less than 15 minutes. Years of entitlement erased in silence. As the meeting adjourned, I stayed seated for a moment, fingers tracing the edge of the folder. I thought about the girl who had sat at that dinner table years ago, heart pounding as he told her she was nothing without him. I thought about the nights I spent alone, counting every dollar, every document, every quiet move. Power hadn't returned to me in a thunderclap. It had returned like water filling a room slowly, quietly, patiently, until he was the one left without air. At noon I walked down to the lobby. It was busy now. Lunchtime chatter, the soft clinking of glasses, the scent of roasted chicken drifting from the dining room. And right there, standing at the front desk again, was my father. He was dressed impeccably as always. Navy blazer, pressed trousers, gold watch glinting under the lights. Gloria stood beside him, lips tight, clutching her handbag like a lifeline. But something was different this time. He wasn't shouting. He was waiting. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed. "So," he said slowly, "is this your doing?" I didn't look at Mr. Cole. I didn't need to. He quietly stepped aside, leaving the space between us wide and clear. I stopped a few feet from him. "The board made a decision," I said evenly. "Don't insult me," he snapped. "You and I both know who runs this place now." The lobby quieted. People noticed. They always did when Daniel Whitaker raised his voice. But this time something was off. He wasn't surrounded by respect. He was surrounded by curiosity. Whispers. I lowered my voice. "Do you remember what you asked 7 days ago? You wanted to see the owner." His jaw tightened. "Yes." "Well," I said, "here she is." For a moment he didn't react. He stared at me, blinking slowly as if the words didn't quite fit together in his mind. Then realization crept in layer by layer. His gaze darted to the staff, to Mr. Cole, to the board members passing through the lobby, all of them looking at me with the quiet acknowledgement they reserved for the person in charge. The air between us changed. He stepped closer. "You," he whispered harshly. "You own this place?" "Every inch of it," I said softly. It wasn't a taunt. It was a fact. His face reddened. "This is revenge." "No," I replied. "This is reality." He opened his mouth but no sound came. For a man who had spent his entire life controlling rooms with his voice, silence was the cruelest mirror. Gloria placed a hand on his arm, whispering, "Daniel, let's go." But he pulled away. His pride wouldn't let him retreat. He turned toward Mr. Cole. "I demand this be reversed immediately." Mr. Cole met his gaze with polite steadiness. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Mr. Whitaker. The board's decision is final. Your membership is terminated. Effective immediately." 2 security personnel appeared, not aggressively, just present. They didn't touch him. They didn't need to. I watched his shoulders stiffen. For the first time in my life I saw him truly cornered. Not by anger, not by opposition, but by rules he couldn't bend anymore. He turned back to me. "You're enjoying this," he spat. I shook my head. "No. But I am done apologizing for taking up space." His lips parted, ready to unleash the same fury I'd heard my entire childhood. But then something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. That he was standing in a building he no longer controlled, surrounded by people who no longer deferred to him, facing a daughter he couldn't command. For a second he looked small. Mr. Cole cleared his throat gently. "Mr. Whitaker, if you would please return your membership card and parking pass." Gloria reached into her purse, pulling out the sleek silver card. She hesitated only a moment before placing it on the desk. He didn't move. "Daniel," she whispered again. "Please." His hand trembled slightly as he removed the card from his wallet. That gold watch of his gleamed like a relic from another era. He placed the card down with a hard snap. It was over. Mr. Cole slid the card into the folder without a word. The receptionist quietly updated the system. The soft ding of the keyboard was almost poetic. Membership terminated. He stood there a moment longer, perhaps expecting someone to stop him, to beg him to reconsider, to restore his throne. But no one did. He turned to leave. The lobby doors opened with their usual soft whoosh, sunlight flooding in. He stepped into it like a man walking into a world that no longer belonged to him. Gloria followed quickly, heels clicking, not daring to look back. I stayed where I was. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply watched the man who once defined my life walk out of a place he thought he owned. When the doors closed, the chatter resumed. Life went on. That evening, after everyone left, I walked through the club slowly. Room by room. Past the bar where members laughed. Past the dining hall where the lights dimmed to a warm amber glow. Up the staircase that once made me feel small. Every corner of this building carried echoes of his voice, his presence, his power. But now it was mine. Not inherited. Not gifted. Built. I stopped by the lobby window, looking out at the parking lot bathed in twilight. His car was gone. In the quiet, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the kind that comes from approval or reconciliation, but the kind that comes when you finally stop needing either. I thought of that night long ago when he told me, "Your path was decided the day you were born." He was wrong. I decided it myself. And I didn't need to shout to prove it. I turned off the lights and locked the doors, the echo of the latch closing sounding like the final period at the end of a very long sentence. If this story gripped your heart, you're exactly where you need to be. Subscribe for more dark, emotional stories of betrayal and quiet revenge. Stories that prove power doesn't always need to scream.